I appreciate the invitation to be here. And Rocky, I thank you for the introduction. You could have included the Department of Corrections there too, dealing with those prisoners. Quite a task. I am absolutely delighted to have the opportunity to speak to you all. It's first and foremost, it's important what you do as the organization of NEBA. Businesses and in this community are, in fact, the place that we've tried to focus in the Leon County Sheriff's Office. And you perhaps ask yourself, what does the sheriff mean by focusing on businesses? Well, one of the things we realize is that some of our crime is the outgrowth of an ongoing, hey, how are you doing? The ongoing level of persons living at or below the poverty level. Not all those persons obviously are involved in crime, but a good many of them in fact are. And not all of those persons who would otherwise not be in crime are going to be employed, but a good number of them would, if there were jobs that met them at their place of need. So we in the Leon County Sheriff's Office embarked upon some time ago, perhaps almost 5 years ago now, an initiative we call All In. And All In really is about us as a collective body of people who live and care about this community. How can we work together to improve the lives of not only ourselves and our families, but this entire community? And we believe, and I believe as the sheriff, that one of my responsibilities is to see if I can coalesce this partnership of us, of all of us working together to see how we can address and improve the lives of every person living in Leon County. So we have, I think on your tables you will find two documents. One that is our annual report, and another is that gives you the progress report as it relates to where we've come from since 2017 up until 2020 in terms of our crime fighting efforts and our All In initiative. I will tell you that from my perspective, and certainly I have a biased one, that we have made significant strides as it relates to fighting and driving down the crime here in Leon County. And that is not an outgrowth of Walt McNeil. It is the outgrowth and the results of that collaboration between you, the citizens of Leon County, our law enforcement partners, and communities around this great county, all trying to work together so that we can drive down and address the issues of crime in our community. I will tell you that, and you can look at this for yourselves, but on average, we've probably averaged somewhere near about 12% reduction in crime over the last 5 years, culminating in about a 35 to 40% reduction in crime during that span of time. Proud of that fact, but I hasten to say right after I talk about crime going down, I hasten to add to it and give you the dark truth about those numbers. I don't believe that those numbers are sustainable. I can tell you that I cannot, nor can the Leon County Sheriff's Office, nor our partners continue to do the kind of work that we're doing to drive down crime if those underpinning types of problems in our community continue to go unaddressed, unabated in our community. And I tell you that from my more than 40 years of experience here in this community. I remember when I was a police chief and we started what we call Weed and Seed. And we went to all the projects in town and we went about the business of trying to identify those families and then try to bring some redress to the issues and problems that they have, particularly dealing with drugs in our community, in those strongholds, if you will, of where drugs permeate and kids are then involved because it's an ongoing sort of if you want to call it a family business, well, it's sort of a family business that's passed on from generation to generation. We were successful then. If you were living here back in 1980, you probably recall that we drove crime down significantly after all the Weed and Seed initiatives in our community. We were marching the streets, the Tallahassee Police Department, walking the streets in those communities saying, down with dope, up with hope. Down with dope, up with hope. My police officers with citizens in those communities walking and having that battle cry. And we saw drugs diminish, crime go down. What happens? I'll digress for a moment. I went to the city commission meeting, I forget what year, and I said to them, they were asking about the crime problems and why is it so pervasive. This was in the throes of our doing the down with dope, up with hope. And I said to them, here's an experiment that I did. I said, on a Friday night, I put all of my officers, and you got to remember, I'm trying to toggle between officers and deputies. There's a big difference. Put all my officers in the zones where they needed to be. That is, if we carved out 24 zones, and I'd put 2 deputies, 2 officers in each one of those zones, so that every part of this community was covered. And I said to that commission, by 1 a.m. on Friday night, every resource that I had as the Tallahassee police chief was in the Bond community, was in Frenchtown. Every one of the resources we had, everything shifted. So I simply said to them, as long as you continue to build, if you perhaps can remember, Frenchtown, we had the projects right there where some of the, now we've got buildings and housing there now for students. As long as you continue to build these multi-complexes, that I think the old complex they had went up about 4 floors, and it was in a circle, and the dirt was in the middle, and so there was nothing that anybody owned. And I said, as long as you continue to build that, you're going to continue to have these problems in that community. Well, the city commission listened, and they went about demolishing that, and they built some good stuff down there now. If you go in that community, you see that it's revitalized, if you will. My point to you all here as business people, it makes little business sense for us to continue to fight crime for the last 40 years in the same way we've trying to address it through arresting our way out of the problem. I will tell you, I am going to arrest everything I can arrest that commits a crime in Leon County. No question about that. I am extremely aggressive about getting people off the street that want to harm you or harm me or harm my family. But I know it's a zero-sum game. That person, those persons are going to be replaced by the next generation of kids who come up in those same circumstances that some found themselves 10, 20 years before that kid. So my challenge to us here in Leon County is to join hands with the Leon County Sheriff's Office, agree with us in terms of our efforts to address the problems of our community through our All In initiative. Let me explain to you more detail about what All In is, and it's in your booklets there somewhere. One of the things we realized is that we have to address the youth problems in our community. And so we went about the effort of saying we need some initiatives. I don't call anything a program. I believe initiatives are things that will last. Programs are things that come and go. So we have an initiative that we put in place across this community. The first one being what we call Worship With Me. Now, I've gone to, and I've asked Shauna Knight, who's here, to go out to every church in this community and sell them this message. The data shows us that there is a 20 to 30% chance that a kid, a young child who has an opportunity to engage in a worship environment at least 2 times, where the congregation is engaged with that child on at least 2 occasions, talking about what they believe in, how they can help, that they care about that family, that child has a 20 to 30% chance of not going into crime. You're going probably 20 to 30% chance, that's nothing. Well, that's better than 0, which is where we are today. So we are engaged in trying to get at least 100 churches in our community engaged in our Worship With Me initiative. Another thing we've done, we have partnered with Boy Scouts. You probably don't know this, but all the drug money that we collect, when we make arrests and we make these drug busts, and we find all these thousands of dollars, some of that money comes back to us. We have to share it sometimes with the federal folks, and the sheriff knows about that. And these drug forfeiture monies, we then try to turn back into our community. We have partnered with Boy Scouts of America. We've identified, I believe it's Basin Street, and I think it's Holton Street projects that we've taken our deputies into, and we've said, with Boy Scouts of America, we will pay for the kids. You know, I'll tell you a quick story before I finish this, I'll digress a moment. When I was a kid growing up, I came from a poor background myself, got into scouting, my mom simply could not afford the stuff that, the uniform. I went the first time and I came back and said, Mom, I got to have a shirt. She said, okay. So I got my Boy Scout shirt. The next meeting I had to have some patches. The next meeting I had to buy a mess kit. The next meeting I had to buy a hatchet. And she said, son, you got to get out of that. I can't afford to keep up with your needs in Boy Scouts. So learning from that lesson, I said that we will pay for all those things that that child needs. We'll pay for his membership, all the things that he needs through those drug forfeiture dollars to make sure that that child can get into scouting, which had not even been contemplated in the places we're talking about here in Tallahassee, to get those kids off the streets of Tallahassee and engage in something very useful, not only to them, but useful to our community. Not only that, but we've also partnered with the Department of Juvenile Justice. I indicated to Rocky here that I was the Secretary of the Department of Juvenile Justice, and one of the things we know is that a kid that has one interaction with the criminal justice system has about a 70% chance of going deeper into the criminal justice system just by that simple one contact. And so what we've done is the kids that are in DJJ who've had that one contact, who's probably likely to go deeper into the system, what we've said is we will take that child and bring him into our Back on Track program, where my deputies will sit down with them on a regular basis. The first thing we do is sit down and have a dinner with this child in a setting much like this and simply have a conversation. And kids are surprised to learn that Walt McNeil grew up in the ghetto too. And they're surprised to learn that many of my deputies didn't come from privileged backgrounds. And we can inspire those kids by talking to them about who we are and what we do and how much we love what we do. And that's been somewhat successful. Now, I can tell you, that's one of the things about this is that that's why it's good that my deputies do this, because there's a lot of failure. You have to be ready that every kid isn't going to take these type programs and move on and get out of the life of crime. We've also reached out to churches, neighborhood organizations, anybody we possibly can to try to figure out how we can meet the people's needs in our communities through, believe it or not, trying to make sure we meet their basic need. You may have heard that we have a farm share partnership where we used to do it before COVID hit. We would have food giveaways through farm share at the sheriff's department. But we would actually have people from those communities come to the sheriff's office, go through our line. We'd make sure we got them food. My point here this afternoon to you all, the leaders of our community, is that law enforcement simply cannot do this by ourselves. And I can tell you that many of these kids don't want to be in a life of crime. They'd like very much to get out of the circumstance they find themselves in. But, and I'll sort of leave you with this and answer questions. But you think about the child who and this is a true story, the child who's 7 years of age, who witnesses his mother's boyfriend beating her up every Friday night. And the same child witnesses his mom and the boyfriend selling drugs, and the drug dealers coming in and out of the house 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning. Here is this child who witnesses the police coming to their home on a regular basis and the mother cursing the police out. This child has a name. This child, last name was Love, ironically. And unfortunately, his nickname was Nuke. And unfortunately, this child who saw all of these horrible things at this tender age of 7, I went to his house with my SWAT team, and I'd never been cursed out by anybody the way this, he was about 8 years old at that point. This 8, 9-year-old kid cursed me out. He used profanity that I'd never heard before. And I turned to his mother and I said, Miss Love, do you hear your son? And her response to me was proof of where he got it from. She cursed me out in ways that the kid was inadequate in. Now, I said to my SWAT team members, we got to try to do something with this kid, or this kid's going to wind up dead. And he did. Lawrence isn't here, Lawrence Rebel, but that kid came after Lawrence Rebel with a car, and Lawrence shot him to death. The point of the matter is, too many of these kids are like that. They don't have a chance. They literally do not have a chance. We can give them that chance. We can't give them all that chance. We can give some of those kids that chance, that opportunity to get out of that lifestyle, to turn their lives around. Now, before anybody thinks I'm some kind of liberal guy that bleeding all this stuff about taking care of these kids, believe, as I said at the outset, I've been locking folks up for a long time, and as long as I'm sheriff, I'm going to continue to lock a bunch of them up. But we can do better. We can do a whole lot better. Now, the way we end all our meetings in Leon County Sheriff's Office, I just simply say, all in. All in? All in. Thank you. Any questions?
Thank you, Walt. Questions? Charlie?
Yes, sir, Sheriff. You talked about some of the things Sheriff's Department's doing, and certainly you presented the need. Now, what can the business community do to help the Sheriff's Department and law enforcement? I mean, what do we do?
Thank you. I left that out on purpose. Here's the things we're doing that we're asking businesses to do. I had the opportunity to meet with the chamber, and I met with the chamber and we created what we call a 1,000 Jobs Initiative. What we've said to the business community that we will identify young people in our community who we believe, through those programs I talked about, Back on Track, Worship with Me, we believe have in fact indicated to us that they're willing to turn their lives around. And we're reaching out to business people like yourselves saying, and in fact, we partnered with Career Source, and here's a real good thing for you. I'm not sure if it's changed because these things are fluid, but Career Source said to us, if we identified a child and we identified the business, we matched those two up, the first 6 months of that child or that adult's working with you will be paid by Career Source. They will pay the first 6 months of their employment with you. So there's an incentive for businesses to engage and take these kids. We're having some. I've got a business, I've been trying to get this thing. I've worked with the chamber Ajax Construction has said they agree, they're going to work with us to get this done. I've got a business in Madison that's a meat packing plant. We've got, now again, we're going to have some, this is one I want to tell you, if you do get involved with us in this, understand the same thing I said about our deputies. Many of these people will fail. They're not all going to come to you and just it all work out. So be aware that it will possibly fail. Now, I digress to say that what I was about to say was there's a meat packing plant in Madison that we partnered with, and they called me up and said, hey, we want to do this. And we arranged it so that we would get these persons coming out of our detention facility, transported to Madison, driven back to Tallahassee on a regular basis. Now, we've only had 3. We've only had 3 to make it work. Now, the problem is that the meatpacking plant said they would provide the transportation, but the transportation deal fell through. And they asked us if we could pick up the cost of a bus going back and forth. That's like $100,000, and I can't handle that one. Does that answer some of your questions?
Yes.
Thank you, Charlie. Anybody else?
Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question that it's always in.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
I got I got to remember I'm not in charge around here.
Just
Catherine is.
from my perspective of a mother that had 4 kids as a single mom. My oldest son died in a motorcycle accident, running away from the police because he had he was missing a tail light and he had a warrant for his arrest for a trespassing charge. So, long story short, he had been involved in juvenile systems all his life, since he was 13. But what I found something to be not so productive, and I just want your opinion about it, is this probation programs that they're always in as juveniles. What do you think about that? They get involved in a juvenile program and then a probation program for another year and a half. When they're young, they're 20, they're 18, they're 17, they want to party, they want to drink, they want to smoke, but they can't do that while they're on probation. What's your opinion about it? Because I always think it's a bad trap for them. That's my perception. And I just want to hear someone else's point of view, especially yours.
Yeah, the judge can probably answer that better than I can, but I just say that probation is not an intervention. What you're looking for is an intervention. And what probation is, that the court's basically saying, okay, we're going to give you another chance, and there's a probation officer who's going to monitor you to make sure you abide by the terms of your probation. That's it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, and it's better than him being incarcerated or in prison, I guess. I mean, from your perspective, it gives him a chance. And I mean, I think it's somewhat focused on rehabilitation as opposed to punishment.
Yeah, but the punishment is always longer and longer and longer.
Perhaps if they make bad decisions.
Okay. All right. It's the same thing I did. Thanks.
Thanks. Good afternoon, Sheriff. Nice to see you.
As well.
I wanted to make 2 observations about information in your pamphlet and ask you a question about each of them. On page 4 of the crimes against property, there's a significant drop in that, and I wonder how much you would attribute that to both the city and the county's effort to increase awareness about your own property, locking your door, not storing your gun in an unlocked car overnight. We have a lot of problems with that in our HOA, and so the city's data often that they show in our area is focused around trying to have the homeowners lock their doors and so on, and reduce break-ins and everything. So I was just wondering if that was part of that one. And then, do you want me to go into the second one? You can answer.
Let me answer that one real quickly. I'm glad you asked that one because we believe it's somewhere near 70%. 70% of our problem of crime in our community is simply that, people locking their doors. If you lock your cars, one, they won't get a gun. None of these criminals go buy guns. They steal them from us, and then they use them in crimes. So if we simply lock our doors, we believe we could get a significant decrease in crime. Now, again, the crime decrease is obviously something that we have to keep focused on because we want to see that crime go down. The major part of what we want to see go down, in addition to that, is the violence we see on our streets. And so while those are 2 companion issues, it's important that if you're not going to lock your cars, at least take your guns out. I mean, because then we can start dealing with some of the violence we have in our community. All right, second question.
So the second question is on the next page, page 5, with the drug seizures in grams and the extraordinarily high bar of marijuana that is seized. And so I'm just curious as to, if you want to prognosticate, what might happen to that number should it become federally legal or even statewide recreationally legal.
I'm not sure to answer the latter part of the question, but I will tell you that most of our shootings, most of our aggravated assaults, and obviously our drug arrests are fueled by marijuana use. Cocaine is second, but marijuana is the driver in our community. And I have no idea why. Well, we have some indications that because it's the preferred drug in our community, that the cartels from Mexico and others are muling it here as the preferred drug in our community. So it's like going to a supermarket. You know, you figure out what people are buying, and that's what they stock their stores with. And drug dealers do the same thing.
Hey, Sheriff. Thank you for being here today. Two questions. I'll ask the first one first. You and your detention center are the largest provider of mental health care in our community. Would you talk a little bit about that and the efforts that you've made on the other behavioral health care side, substance abuse, for people that are in the detention center?
Yes, Rocky, thank you for that. We have, and we've said this for a long time, I'm sure Sheriff Harvey remembers, Sheriff Campbell would always talk about, we've got the largest hotel in this area, quite honestly. And 40% of that hotel is occupied by persons with mental health problems. Realizing that, we've embarked upon partnerships with Appalachian Mental Health. And what we've done is, and we're right in the middle of a contract right now we're trying to put on the street and get some providers for, along with Appalachia. We know that if we can have interventions with persons while they're in our detention facility, if we can get them on the right medication before they come back into our community, that we're going to have some successes. Somewhere 40 to 50% of those persons won't come back if we're able to do these interventions while they're in our care and custody. The problem is, or has been, before I got there, persons leaving with a mental health problem left our detention facility with 7 days worth of medication for their psychological issues, the problems, what have you. Obviously, within a week or in a month or two, that person's committing a crime, back off his medication, and it's a revolving door. They're back with us, back on the streets. So what we tried to do now, working with Appalachia and Corizon, which is our mental health provider in our detention facility, is to have what I call a seamless process of reentry back into our community. So there's a continuum of care that exists between what they receive while incarcerated with us and as they leave our institution. Now, to accomplish that, Corizon has to cooperate with Appalachian Mental Health. And then Corizon has to make sure when those persons leave that we give them up to a month's worth of medication. Now, we don't give it all to them at one time. They have to get prescriptions for this and go get it incrementally so they don't do an overdose of stuff. But they also then have to show up at Appalachian Mental Health, so that Appalachia now is working with them on the outside so that we can extend that period in which they are off or on their medication so that they won't come back into our institution. And the idea then being that hopefully, you perhaps know that all of their hospitalization stuff stops when they come into our institution. So they can't receive Medicaid, Medicare, whenever they're coming out while they're with us. So when they come back into the community, we then try to reignite over that period of time, them getting back the medication, getting back into medical care that they absolutely need. That's a daunting task for us, something that really hasn't been done before, at least in our community. And it's something that I think we're going to reap some real good benefits from. Now, we're in the process right now of getting that contract done and getting Corizon and Appalachia working together. I will tell you that we also were successful working with Lorraine Osley and our legislative delegation to get a $350,000 commitment from the federal government to assist us with another part of the mental health piece, which is our deputies, and I said this about 5 years ago, I said it to EMS and to the county commission, that there's no reason for deputies or police officers to respond to a mental health problem where a person calls in and the mom says, my son's here and he won't take his medication. Well, they sent us, and we respond to that call. Or my father's here, he refused to take his medication, and we go to that call. So what we said was EMS is more equipped to deal with those kind of situations than we are. Now, EMS didn't want to do it, so as it is in our society, who steps in? Well, we have to out of necessity. So we've stepped in. We got $350,000 from the state, and we are putting together a program. TPD's already done one, and we're in the process of doing it the same way, but a little differently. Our a mental health provider will ride with our deputy, if we ever get out of this COVID environment, that is. So a deputy and a mental health provider responds to that call. The mental health provider goes in and talks about how we get this person back on his medication, and we're there to make sure that nothing happens to the mental health provider. Thank you.
So that's your mobile response team.
That's the mobile response team.
Mobile response team, right. So the other question I just wanted is maybe is more just a little bit of a statement. If you have a lot of small business people here, and I think I can speak for most of them, if not everybody, that we are all very supportive of law enforcement. We understand how important it is that you and your officers have the privilege of coming home to your family and your children every day, and that's always questionable whether that will happen. So I just wanted to say that we appreciate what you and your officers and all law enforcement people do for our community to make it safe, because we want to all stay here in Tallahassee.
Yeah, thank you, Bernie. I appreciate that. While you're getting the mic to someone else, real quickly, in our detention facility right now, we have upwards of 100 cases of persons who've contracted COVID. That's the inmates themselves. 42 members of my staff have contracted COVID, and they're in various stages of coming back. Some that 14-day quarantine are in stages of that. And I've had 2 deaths. I've had 2, one of my corrections officers passed away last week, and one of my crime scene staff passed away as well. Question?
Sorry to hear that, Sheriff. It does segue to the question I have with regard to recruitment of new deputies. You were here a couple of years ago with the chief talking about how you're kind of competing for that talent pool, and that you were going down from 4 years to 2 years of college requirement. So that's my question, but I'd ask you to also address the variables that are out there with the defund the police and the social political climate that's been fairly anti-law enforcement. So I was wondering how your office has been, have you been suffering from that, and if so, how you've been able to address it?
Thank you. The first part of the question, we, in our recruiting efforts, we are doing fairly well. We've changed some of the things that we do. You mentioned the education requirement. We still, I tweaked that again. We still say that we want a college education as one of the requirements, but we call it preferred now, as opposed to so that if you don't have the degree, you can still apply and you can get employed. But we want to get the very best. At the end of the day, we want to have people that understand the law and can apply the law. And that means, for me, it usually means a person has a higher degree of education to enable to do that. But because we are in a crisis, we have to keep the window open for others to come through as well. The issues of defund the police and the attacks on law enforcement are outgrowths of the times that I think we're living in. It seems that common respect for each other, the idea of allowing another person who disagrees with your point of view. I always, I mean, a lot of people disagree with me, and I don't get mad. My wife disagrees with me, and I shut up and sit down. So I have a real difficult time with all the angst that I see and all the social media that kind of drives all that whole discussion. I will tell you, I make no bones about the fact that as an African American, I do see discrimination when it occurs. And I call it out for what it is, and we move on. And that's what I hope that other people do is let's say what the problem is, and we try to address it and fix it, and not get caught up into all these other discussions that I see. As it relates to law enforcement and those things, there's no question in my mind that George Floyd acted way outside of the scope of what law enforcement's about, which sprung all these other things into action around our nation and our state. And I have been advocating long before this stuff about defund the police. I've been advocating, for example, I talked to you here today about how we're spending our resources. I've always spent resources in law enforcement, not just for guns and cars and that kind of thing. And I don't think the sheriff did either. We always have spent monies in terms of social initiatives in our community, because those are your dollars. Those are your taxpayer dollars, and we have to figure out how can we best utilize your taxpayer dollars to assist and grow this community to the community you love it to be. So from my perspective, in fact, many of the people who've tried to attack the sheriff's office have been rebuffed, in large part because, you know, there's a whole difference between the sheriff's office and the police department. I was a police chief, so I can tell you there's a difference. And the fact that, you know, when I'm standing up and saying this is what we're going to spend the money for, that's where it's going to be spent. And Lawrence can't say that all the time. And he has to be careful about what he says in various situations. I don't have that restraint. So quite honestly, I've not had the same vitriol, if you will, coming at the sheriff's office that I've seen at the police department. Yes, sir.
Excuse me.
I'm sorry.
Thank you. Sheriff, I do want to echo Barney's comments as well. So I won't go down that road. But I'm curious, so I get feet on the street, you know, the nose of the canine, that's great. I'm curious if you can talk about either some of the technologies that you're using or that are starting, and I know we're not living in the world of like CSI, right? But drones, you're starting to see those. So can you talk about some of the technologies that you guys are looking at?
Oh yeah,
currently using?
glad to. We are extremely excited about our drone utilization. We do have drones, and we deploy those. In fact, I won't cite exactly what the legislation changed to, but previously the state of Florida would not allow us to use the drones in the way that I wanted to use them. But now they have. I don't know what the change was, but my attorney tells me we can use them the way I wanted to. And so we are now placing those. We just had a SWAT call out last weekend, and we put those drones in the house, and without putting our dogs in harm's way or the deputies. Great outcome. We have. Did I knock that off? It looked like I did.
I'm not sure what they have done.
That's mine, like,
Oh, that's yours? Got it.
that's nothing.
There.
Yep.
It's-
The other piece of that is we started a real-time crime center. I think Barney's aware of what we did there. We had a little bit of a pushback initially about real-time crime. What a real-time crime center is basically, we have a room that's dedicated with persons who are expert analysts, and these analysts, they look at the intersections, and we have what's called license plate readers. So when you're driving down the highway and you pass by these, and the sheriff's kind of smiling because I probably shouldn't tell you this, but when you pass through some intersections, we've got a reader there. It reads your license plate. It shoots that information back to our real-time crime center. We've got people there who are looking at that. If there's a wanted person that just drove through there, we can see it in real time, and then we start to put that information out to the deputies on the road that there's a car in this area that was involved in this type of crime. We were very successful in getting the city of Tallahassee to give us some of their cameras. We've asked the businesses in our community. I did this 3-4 years ago. I had a meeting where I asked a bunch of business people to come in, and I asked if they would allow us to get the feed from their cameras in their stores. And I think I've got a few, not many. And I was telling Rocky here and Miss Barber that I had the opportunity to sit down with President Thrasher and talk about this real-time crime center. And he said, wow, let's make that happen bigger. And we have that currently in the sheriff's office. And in a few weeks, I hope, we're going to transfer all of those screens over to FSU. We got a room larger than this one. We're going to have screens on the complete wall covered with screens so that we can see all the stuff that's going on in Tallahassee and be able to put our folks out there. So slow down if you.
Sheriff, we go back a long ways. I was blessed to deal with a lot of y'all. Like David Harvey was served a century, I guess, down what color. But so I appreciate your leadership, and everything revolves around it. Speaking of which you brought in 2 questions. One, do we have some kind of citizen app that people can text in, or, you know, kind of like our neighborhood in Clarn has the thing, 15,000 people out there, and they have a citizen kind of, you know, social media type thing. Can we have something like that, or do we have something like that? And second, can you speak briefly, we're running out of time, about the COVID fallout? Because I'm really concerned that we're not even seeing what's below the surface with everything with that. You know, preventive programs kind of.
Well, yeah, I'm happy to tell you, and Shonda Knight's over there. Shonda, you have your app with you?
I do. Our app is called LCSO Connect.
Okay.
So you can go to the App Store. Our app is called LCSO Connect. So you can go to the App Store, download it. You'll get push notifications on if there's something happening. Also 9 p.m. routine reminders to lock your doors. You can monitor what's happening in your neighborhood. It links to all of our social media accounts. There are a lot of resources there, so definitely download the app.
.com?
It's just an app. It's an app.
Oh, just
Yep.
that.
Yep.
Chandra, I hate to throw cold water on your plan, but I'm in bed at 7, so 9 o'clock alert for me.
I'll text you directly if you'd like.
Lock you in the
On the COVID front, I really, I gave you the data from the sheriff's office. I don't get a lot of data. Initially, when we started out with the COVID situation, I met with the hospital regularly. We met, and since, and then the COVID problem receded, and we opened the sheriff's office back up. And I have not reconnected with the hospital folks as much as I had been previously. So I don't really know the day-to-day stuff that they are talking about now as much as I did then.
Sheriff, while we're on the question of COVID, we've all been under a lot of stress because of COVID. Have you seen an uptick in violence because of the stress people are under because of COVID?
I have not, but I had a guest on, by the way, on Tuesdays at 11, Shonda, tell them where we need to be. Tuesday at 11, there's a Walt McNeil show that comes on. So
we have a show on Fox 49 every Tuesday morning at 11 a.m. It's a 30-minute show with the sheriff and community partners talking about crime-related issues, crime prevention issues, all in Leon. So every Tuesday morning, set your DVRs, 11 a.m.
That's right, set the DVRs, because we're all at work, right?
DVR it, for sure.
So to answer the question, we're trying, Ted, to, in every way we can, just kind of connect. And I had a lady on the show who came in and basically said, as far as domestic violence is concerned, that it is in fact increasing. Now, and I said we're trying to connect, and during this period of time we're talking about school was out during the summer. And our connection to trying to address that issue is another initiative we have, where every time a deputy responds to a house where there's domestic violence involved, what I've said to my deputies is, you are required, you will in fact, if there's a child there, you will in fact get all that information about that child and that family, and on the next day at that school, you will make sure the school is being apprised of what that child saw, what that child went through. Because what I believe happens is these kids, you talk about post-traumatic stress. Can you imagine being in a house? I talked about the little Love kid, 7 years old, and seeing his mom and her boyfriend fighting every weekend. And so what we're trying to do is have those interventions where our deputies, they get there, they see what went on, we get that information to the school, and we're happy to say the school is then reaching out with their clinicians there at the school and getting those kids into a safer place so they can start talking about de-escalation, if you will, trying to get that family back into a better place. But to answer your question, yes, there's been an uptick.
Thank you for being here, Sheriff McNeil. I use the deputies in my store constantly. We have a detail, we have a different one in every day, 6 days. I guess it's 6, actually it's 5 days a week. And I've gotten to know a lot years. I've had various deputies, and of course they protected different areas where we were carriage gate. But I've gotten to know a lot of these deputies, and I find them to be extremely capable and terrific people. And you know, it's a real pulse of the community because it keeps us aware of what's going on. One of the questions that came up the other day was actually I had because of the news that only 28% of the deputies are now vaccinated for COVID. Is that the latest information? And what's the plan? I mean, these guys are wrestling with some of the people that may have them and all. It just seems like a low amount. Isn't that lower than average?
I'm not sure what the average is, but I will tell you that I challenged our entire sheriff's office. When I say the number you saw was not just deputies, that was the entire sheriff's office. That's 700 employees. I think that most of my deputies are actually vaccinated, but I can't say that empirically. But what I've challenged us to do in the sheriff's office, you know, the first question they asked me was, am I going to take the same position that the county has taken, which is to require the vaccination? And I said, I hope I don't have to. That I said this to us, to not just my deputies, but the entire sheriff's office, that we are different. And you may all differ about this than my perspective is, and again, that's why we are Americans. We can have a conversation and have a difference of opinion. But my opinion is that I don't have an option of trusting the government. I stood and put my hand on the Bible and said, I swear to the Constitution of the state and state of Florida. So it's like being in the military. I don't have an option of charging that hill. The enemy is on the hill. I got to charge the hill. And I said that to our deputies and our staff that, you know, we can't say to citizens we don't trust the government. We are the government. So and that's what I got across to them, that we are the government. We represent the government. So we can't go around telling people, I don't trust that shot because it's government. They're trying to sneak in stuff from us. Now, some of my people probably don't believe that. But what I've said to them is that I hope not to force us to take the vaccine. I hope that our goal is to get it to 80%. And now, as of today, we're right at 40% from that 28% that you saw earlier. So I hope by October that we're at the 80% mark.
Appreciate you.
You're welcome.